All right. Hey, and welcome to the Wrestling with Emotions podcast. My name is Rob, and I'm excited to bring you the first episode. The first episode titled Emotions Running Mild. That's right. We're going to look at a few things this week. Number one, we're going to take some highlights from Smackdown, talk a little bit about some of the recent booking for WWE, which will, of course, lead us into speculation for Wrestlemania. We'll talk a little bit about AEW, and then more importantly, I want to kind of give you an idea of what to expect from this podcast, where to find us, and how often I plan on uploading. So starting out, if you haven't been following wrestling, I think, since the Royal Rumble and the results from that show, basically, if you don't know or haven't been following religiously, the two winners, the men's and the women's Royal Rumble winners, obviously they go on to highlight and main event a WrestleMania match of their choosing. They basically they get to choose which champion they're going to face. And basically that has already been established. We're moving forward. So from the men's side, actually, let's start with the women's because it's a little bit more cut and dry, and I think we're going to touch on this in a second too, because from a storytelling standpoint, there's not a lot going on the women's side. So if you didn't see, Charlotte Flair returned at the Royal Rumble after months and months of being out with various knee injuries. So she is back. The reception to her winning, I would say, like I said, emotions running mild. I think it was expected. It was the most obvious choice for who was in the match, and that's more importantly, kind of talking about some of the booking notes that I was talking about before. There's not a lot of creativity in terms of like what's going on the women's side, aside from a few storylines involving Liv Morgan, Rhea Ripley, some of the stuff around Tiffany Stratton and Nia Jax, which is in turn mild in itself. There's not a lot going on. Some of the highlights in the women division aren't being highlighted as much. Obviously, Chelsea Green, your United States Women's Champion. But anyways, Charlotte returns. She wins the Royal Rumble. She does the tour of the shows. She goes to SmackDown. She goes to NXT. She, of course, goes to Raw. And then eventually returns to SmackDown to challenge Tiffany Stratton for the Women's Championship at WrestleMania. So that match has been decided. That's where we are for the women's side. On the men's side, going into the Royal Rumble, this is where, I think these two differ, the men's and the women's. There were multiple angles and storylines that could have taken shape from that event on who was going to win. My speculation was that CM Punk was going to win. I think that probably might have been too obvious, but then the other obvious choice was possibly John Cena, who they're looking to have win that, illustrious record-breaking championship, surpassing Ric Flair. They, of course, both get eliminated, and at the very end of the day, it ends up being Jey Uso who wins. So a lot of people were super happy for him online, especially his peer group, for winning the Royal Rumble. It was kind of obvious, I think, who he was going to challenge. They tried to deflect some of the storytelling, I think, right after the Rumble, where he immediately basically said he was going to go for Gunther. They tried to leave a little bit of mystery for the Monday night episode and then SmackDown, where he talked to Cody and said, hey, maybe I go after your championship. And they run it back, or they run it at WrestleMania. That obviously did not end up happening. He'll face Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania. So now you're up to and seeing, well, what's going to happen with the Cody Rhodes angle? We, of course, have Elimination Chamber. I think at this particular point, it's next Saturday night. And that consists of, you have Damian Priest, Drew McIntyre, CM Punk, John Cena. Who else is in that match? Elimination Chamber 2025. Men's match. Let me see who else, because I'm missing some folks, because the reality is, like, a lot of these guys are not. No, I'm missing Seth Rollins and Logan Paul. So some of the speculation, of course, for this match is that John Cena will win and he'll challenge Cody. There's also speculation that somehow CM Punk, Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns will end up in some type of three-way match on one of the nights at least at WrestleMania. And then there's also speculation online that CM Punk could join John Cena and Cody Rhodes in the main event match as well. So those were all prior to Thursday night, really. Then Thursday night of last week, The Rock announces on Twitter that he is coming back. He'll be on Smackdown the following night as the final boss. So we get him joining the show in one of the more confusing segments that we've had in a long time. And this is where I think arrogance and storytelling can sometimes blend, especially when one thing goes really well. I think everybody can probably agree that the build-up and the payoff to WrestleMania last year, the WWE did an amazing job. Obviously, there was an initial backlash to Cody's spot being basically taken from The Rock, taken by The Rock to challenge Roman Reigns. Backlash online forced The Rock into a heel character, the final boss character, which we now know. And it harkened back to, a more dangerous, exciting character that we hadn't seen really on WWE television in decades, probably. So with that said, he returns at the beginning of the year. We get the final boss coming back to Netflix. So we went through a year of storytelling where he is coming after Cody Rhodes. There's a lot of animosity. He beats him up outside, destroys his family on the mic, insults his mother, family, father, dynasty, everything you can think of. And then goes on Netflix for the first episode of Monday Night Raw in the Netflix era and basically puts all that shit in the trash. Thanks, Cody, for being such a great champion the last year, carrying the flag for WWE and essentially burying a storyline midstream that they have been working on for like a year. So what do you do in that sense? So he comes back on Friday night, essentially, we think, trying to right some wrongs and establish what he's going to be from a participation standpoint for WrestleMania. He faces Cody in the center of the ring. They go back and forth. I'll save you all the details because obviously it was a long segment. 18 minutes on YouTube if you want to check it out. You can watch the whole thing on the USA Network app there for WWE. Where basically he says to Cody, I don't care. I don't want the belt. I want your soul. So what does that mean? I think there's been a ton of indications that potentially Cody Rhodes could turn into a heel himself. We've seen, since he's won the championship, countless friend after friend that he thought was in his corner, who helped him win that title last year, have come home to challenge him for the belt. So we'll see what happens there, but incredibly confusing. So basically, after the show too, Rock indicates, it's not just about wrestling. It's about the story. So basically saying, I don't need to face him in the ring to keep the story going. I'm sorry, but yes, you do. This is what we do. This is what we watch. Because if we're just there listening to the conversation, if we're there just listening to the promos and the back and forth, and there's no payoff from a wrestling standpoint, then that kind of goes against, everything that we're used to and everything that, we're taught to, expect from a wrestling program. And program meaning feud, whatever you want to call it, between a number of individuals, and there's the payoff, and then obviously they all move on to whatever's next. So speculation now, who knows what happens going into WrestleMania. I think it's still so up in the air from where Cody goes from here, who challenges for the title. I think next weekend when I mentioned Elimination Chamber, we should hopefully get some of this cleared up. The Rock has said he will already be making an appearance there, and he's going to expect an answer from Cody Rhodes. So we'll see how that goes, what that entails, and then hopefully what that brings. Because basically, after Elimination Chamber, you're right into WrestleMania the next month. I believe. I don't, because this is for March. I don't think, is there a pay per view or PLE, whatever you want to call it, PLE, WWE events 2025. I think we go straight into WrestleMania, which in and of itself is now confusing. So, yeah, we got Elimination Chamber, and then we have nothing from March. So we do the good. I mean, the good thing is they definitely have plenty of time now. Almost a full month and a half, 2 months to build the final lineup for WrestleMania 41, because we go from March 1st, the Elimination Chamber in Toronto, to April 19th and 20th, WrestleMania 41 in Las Vegas. So we'll see what happens there. And then, like I said, this Saturday night should clear up a lot of that. So we'll find out what's going on there. On the other side, traditionally, you have the younger brother or the stepson, AEW climbing the ranks. The last several shows on TV have been pretty great, actually. Word has it that behind the scenes, Bryan Danielson has become more involved in some of the creative and some of the story writing, which you can see if that's true on television. Things are a lot more tight when it comes to the segments on the show, the flow, some of the programs that they're building on both the men's side and the women's side. So exciting to see what happens there. Of course, we're all leading up to Revolution 2025, and that's going to take place, of course, in Los Angeles, and that is also coming up very soon on March 9th. So exciting to see. Of course, we got the headline match right now already set. Cope versus Jon Moxley. A few other matches already announced for that card, which I'm excited about. Hangman Adam Page versus MJF. And then the winner of Orange Cassidy versus Takeshita this week will go on to face Kenny Omega for the AEW International Championship. All indications is that it's going to be Takeshita. I can't see how they're not going to continue to do the Don Callis family angle with him. And then, of course, in a steel cage, you've got Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. I don't know what it is. I cannot get into Kyle Fletcher. I know they're pushing him hard. He does a lot of the things that Will Ospreay can do, obviously. But I don't know, there's something about him that's not very exciting. So, I mean, I really, that match will be cool because obviously they'll both put on a really good show. But I am not invested personally in Kyle Fletcher. So we'll see what happens with the Will Ospreay piece. And then if we do get Takeshita versus Kenny Omega, I honestly really hope that this is the end of the angle for the Don Callis family piece with Kenny Omega. I think he's got to either win the championship or go on to push for the world championship again. And I think, I think from an internal standpoint, and this is all speculation, I think what they'll probably do is continue to push him in the international picture because he did and was a great AEW world champion. But they've really got to legitimize some of these other belts. And I know he does like to defend and go back to Japan, so that will give him the opportunity to do that outside of the normal Forbidden Door window that they usually have a couple of times a year. So he'll be able to do that. But I think it's really time that we separate that storyline because, and to no fault, and really to no fault of AEW, I think they're doing their best to try to put a bow on something that's been really played out for the last 2 years. And I think only the reason that it's been so extended for the most part has been the injuries of Kenny Omega when he came back originally from multiple surgeries following the loss of his championship to Hangman. He was out for, I think, 9 months at that particular point. Came back, and then at that time he was obviously teaming up with the Bucks. They won the trios titles, more drama, and then again when he's set to start a new program, he's working with Chris Jericho. He gets deadly sick and then he's out for a little over a year. So I think they're trying to continue, hopefully put a bow on some of that. Speaking of putting a bow, we had last night's Collision, which has been getting increasingly better from week to week. I don't follow a lot of the ratings, obviously. I don't really care about television ratings. I know a large segment of the wrestling audience does. I care about the quality of the shows and the matches that they have. And I think we're living in a world now where that is important, but it's not as important as the contracts that they have with some of these large, obviously, Time Warner, Warner Brothers Discovery, rather, where they have the online component. Very hard to tell ratings from, those types of programs or those types of platforms. So you can only really judge by the quality of the shows. Increasingly better. I know they caught a lot of shit a couple of weeks ago. And here's the funny thing about the wrestling community as well, right? I'll play both sides of the fence. I don't want to be a tribalist where I care about one or the other, but I will say this: there is a segment of the population that consistently shat on Collision, obviously Rampage when it was on, and Rampage was a bust, but consistently shat on Collision as a B show or even a C show in some cases. Saturday nights. So when Toni Storm returned from a hiatus, came back, she's then on TV, and the first match she's going to have in a return match is going to be on Collision. And the internet was in an uproar. How could you bury her first return match on TBS TNT programming versus having her come out on Dynamite or a pay-per-view to come back? And then, of course, if you watch the program, you see that she's building her character from a ground-up perspective again. She's playing the role of younger Toni Storm with her rock and roll persona. So now each week you can expect better and better shows, and it's good. And obviously, it gives you an opportunity to watch wrestling. Really, if you wanted to consistently, right now on TV, between all the big promotions and some of the smaller ones, that includes AEW, WWE, Impact, the NXT brand, which is obviously WWE. You get wrestling, really, if you look at it, almost Monday through Friday, and then now Saturday nights. So you can consistently watch. So why watch just to watch? So the programming's getting a lot better. And now last night, it looks like, and it's probably going to be confirmed for Revolution, probably this Wednesday, I would imagine. It hasn't hit the boards just yet, but I'm sure it will. And when I say boards, I mean the AEW website. Mariah May attacks Toni Storm at Collision, setting up round 3 and hopefully the conclusion of their feud for Revolution in 2 weeks. And then from a build standpoint, you've got a lot of exciting stuff to look forward to in AEW. You have a new venue for Double or Nothing. It's going to be in Glendale, Arizona, as opposed to typically, I don't think it's ever been anywhere else but Las Vegas, so that'll be interesting. And then, of course, the big event for the year is still in July. Tickets are still on sale, and that's for All In Texas at Globe Life Field in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So a lot to look forward to there, but I'm excited for Toni Storm, Mariah May round 3, and the conclusion of that feud. I think it's been, truthfully, there's a couple of things within AEW I can say from the beginning that I really enjoyed, or that got me back into wrestling, and we'll talk about this at a future podcast, and I'll kind of talk about that next too. But from a storytelling standpoint, there's been a couple of standouts for me. One, and briefly, the Elite, specifically the Hangman Adam Page, Kenny Omega feud, redemption, and crowning of a new champion in Hangman Adam Page, and then his progression still is great storytelling. But for the last year and a half on both sides, and I'll include the bloodline from WWE, my favorite thing to watch in wrestling has been Toni Storm. The Mariah May angle obviously has been exciting, but just the character work that she has done with Timeless Toni Storm has been refreshing, something different, and fun to watch. Her promos have been really funny, and the matches have been good. So excited to see what happens there. And like I said, we'll probably get the conclusion of that feud at Revolution. So what to expect? So this podcast obviously is a wrestling podcast, a wrestling fan podcast. So I am not going to, this is what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to shit on everything. I'm going to tell you the things that I don't like, but I'm going to also point out some of the highlights because I think that's the difference between what you'll hear here and some other places is, like I mentioned before, the tribalist piece. The tribalist piece. So the tribalistic nature of people are you're either a fan of AEW or you're a fan of WWE and everything else in between, and besides that sucks. No, we're not going to do that here. There are highlights and lowlights of every program. That's just naturally how it is for the amount of television that both of these companies push out on a weekly basis. There is going to be some stinkers and there's going to be some stuff we're not excited about. So what you can expect to hear from this podcast, you'll get opinion-based feedback on the product that I watch. So with that said, I don't watch every single segment on Raw and I don't watch every single segment on Smackdown. I'll watch the highlights of the people that I like, the people that I know, but if it's a match that I'm like, I could care less about this, I will switch off. And a great example, Royal Rumble. In between the men's and the women's matches, you had two other matches. One was Kevin Owens versus Cody Rhodes. Ladder match, terrific. The other match was the Motor City Machine Guns versus DIY, Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. Who I couldn't explain to you why that match was even on a pay-per-view, honestly. And it's things like that for like TV that I would tune out and watch something else and then wait for the next segment because I just don't care. I'm not invested in those characters. That it's some of the stuff that seems kind of thrown together, and there's a lot of that on AEW as well. Trust me, I completely understand and completely get it. So we're going to talk primarily about AEW, Dynamite, sometimes Collision, depending upon the segments. Obviously, I do watch and buy all the pay-per-views, so I'll have some highlights and lowlights of those. And then from the WWE standpoint, I do watch all the premium live events. And then I do know from a storytelling standpoint where a lot of the major storylines are in WWE. But some of like the tertiary character stuff, I mean, I'll comment on it from time to time if it makes sense. But other than that, I really don't give a shit. Then what can you expect outside of that? I'm going to go through the history of my fandom with wrestling. I think there's a long-standing opportunity to kind of talk about how I actually got into wrestling, my ebbs and flows of fandom. Wow. There's probably like been a few periods. One was as long as almost a decade where I was like just completely out of it. I didn't care. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And just so you know, it's primarily around 2001 to maybe 2010, something like that, where I was out. So we'll talk through that. We'll talk about why I enjoy it now, some of my favorite wrestlers, matches, and maybe we'll go through some, history of certain pay-per-views, some of the matches and things that I really enjoyed as a kid, that I still get excited to watch either on the WWE Network or YouTube videos. So exciting times ahead and a lot of discussion around wrestling. And then sometimes this might veer off into other things. Wrestling with emotions, right? We're talking about different things and aside from wrestling as well. We'll talk a little bit briefly on some entertainment things that cross our path in the moment that kind of just, I don't know, get us wanting to talk about it. So it doesn't have to be specifically all about wrestling all the time. But we'll do our best to try to stay as much on topic as well. And again, it depends on the product. If things aren't interesting, we'll try to veer off and figure out things that are. So I look forward to the journey. I'm glad you took the chance to take a listen to this. Hope you like the song at the beginning, or at least the quick intro. I'm going to drop the whole song at the very end of this episode. So it might be a little bit longer. I won't do that every time, but I do want everybody to have a chance to kind of hear the full theme song. You can find us eventually on a number of platforms to include YouTube. This is already set up. The channel is Wrestling with Emotions, just how it sounds, just how it's spelled. So it's at Wrestling with Emotions. That's our YouTube channel. Right now, some of the audio clips will be obviously uploaded there, and then eventually we will be looking into doing some type of video slash studio type work. Because in addition to being a wrestling fan that watches the program, I do collect a lot of stuff as well. So I have a number of figures, a lot of signed properties and pieces. I'm going to a signing event in New York next month. So if you are going to be in the New York area, what is it called again? I think his autograph. It used to, that's the thing about some of these autograph things is they I don't know if anybody else follows these um, experiences, but a lot of these companies seem to change names all the time. Like I've gone through couple different signings in New York, New Jersey, some of the hotels and some of the areas there where they'll have. I've met numerous people: Bret Hart, Trish Stratus, Lita. A lot of big names from yesterday and today. Mariah May, when she had just broken into AEW. So it's called Big Event New York. It is a signing event that's going to take place in March. I believe it's the weekend of March 15th. I'll get you that right now. Yeah, Big Event March, the Big Event EXS 315 to 2025. It's an exciting event. I'm not promoting, or I'm not obviously paid by them, but just to kind of give you an idea of who's going to be there, it'll be people like Ric Flair, not Mariah May, Mercedes Monet, a lot of folks. So they tie directly into shows like WrestleCon and things like that. So they're going to also be there in April if you're in the Vegas area with some folks that are going to be signing. So that is where you can find this. That's where you can expect to hear from us again. Until next time, keep watching and give me your feedback. Super excited to be launching this. I know the world needed one more podcast. So, guys, have a great week. Talk to you soon.
Out in the ring where we throw down, heartbeats racing, can't slow down. Feel the tension, feel the heat, emotions hitting on repeat. Wrestling win with our inner fight. In the spotlight every night. Voices shout and bodies clash. In this world emotions crash. Tangled up in thoughts we spin, in the chaos we begin. Finding strength that's deep inside, facing fears we cannot hide. Wrestling win with our inner fight. In the spotlight every night. Voices shout and bodies clash. In this world emotions crash. Every grapple, every hold tells a story to be told. Raw and real and full of fire, pushing through the darkest mire. Wrestling with our inner fight. In the spotlight